You are going to write some papers, I assume, soon. If you haven't already, you probably have done some writing already for exams, maybe, and maybe some other stuff in the first year, and you probably did it all wrong. So I'm going to explain to you how to not do it all wrong, how to do it right. But before you take any of my advice, you should know that I'm just one person. I'm a pretty awesome person, and I do some really cool things with my writing, but that doesn't mean that I know all the rules or have the only view there is. Of course, everybody has different view of writing, and that is what makes writing exciting. Writing is a point of view. It's a perspective. And when you write, you are putting your point of view out in the world. If you don't think you have a point of view, it shows in your writing. If you're not really sure why you're writing, it shows in your writing. If you didn't really care too much about your writing, it shows in your writing. So the reason that you might want to listen to what I have to say about writing is I write a lot. I love to write. I love my subject, tax law, and I love to tell other people why they should love my subject. So my writing has to be extremely persuasive. I'm sure you can imagine when I just said that I love tax law, that of this class of 100, whatever, half of the people in their Zoom rooms who aren't showing their faces rolled their eyes. Like, how could you possibly love tax law? There's nothing to love about tax law. But I do, and therefore I have to be persuasive to convince you why you should love tax law too, or at least you should love the things that I love about tax law. As part of my job of being persuasive is done in the classroom, but a huge part of my job is done on paper. And as lawyers, pretty much what you're doing all day, every day is working with words, and you're going to be reading what other people wrote. So writing is part of it is just unraveling what someone else wrote. And part of it is trying to figure out, well, what is it that you want to add to the story? What is it that you want to highlight? Because only you can highlight what you can highlight. I can't write your paper for you. You have to write it yourself from your heart. So here we go. Let's take a look. Well, so, hello, my name's Allison Christians. You can see me, there's my Twitter handle at the bottom. It's Prof Christians. I invite you to find me on Twitter, where you will find all sorts of commentary on tax law, international tax law, tax policy, and how much I love tax law, and of course, loi fiscale. For those of you who don't know, I'm a tax law professor. Do come and find me on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram, rarely, LinkedIn, and some other places. You can find me online. Okay, here's where we're going to go. This is what I hope to cover, a couple of topics. I'm going to cover some really basic rules for writing good papers in law school. This is from my own writing, which you have access to. You can read it yourself. I hope that you have read it. Some of this will then be familiar, and hopefully we will be drilling it in as we go. And again, they're my rules, not your rules, not somebody else's rules, my rules. So they aren't everybody in the world does not have to agree with these rules, but they're my perspective on what makes good papers in law school. I'm going to then give you a dozen words to take out of your professional writing right now and never use again, ever, ever, ever use again, if you could possibly help it. But then you can sneak them in every once in a while, but you have to really be sure. You have to really think about them before you use them. I'm going to give you those 12 words to be careful about. And then the last thing I'm going to do is tell you about the awesome power of effective visuals in professional writing. Probably you have some idea of visuals in professional writing. And by now in this presentation, you already have a sense that I love graphics. I love pictures. I love visuals. So I'm a visual thinker. Maybe you are, and maybe you aren't. If you're not, that's okay. You should still understand the power of a visual, because you may be able to harness the things that do make you learn and use them in your presentation in a different way. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with really basic rules for writing good papers in law school. Okay, I have 3 sections in this paper that I wrote about writing really basic rules for writing good papers in law school. The first is structure, the second is substance, and the third is style. So we'll go through all 3. So let's obviously start with structure. The structure is the most important. I can't emphasize this enough. I can't tell you this enough times. Stop not listening to me when I tell you this, students. You need to listen to this. I know everything I say sounds like I think it's the most important thing in the world, but this one really is important. You can mess up more by ignoring structure than by almost anything else. There's a few other things that I will, probably be shouty about, but structure is like, it's basic. If you don't sit around and think about what am I trying to do, then no one's going to read your work. So here's the roadmap, more or less, the roadmap to a good structured paper, okay, of any size, whether it's an answer on an exam, or it's a short paper for a class, or it's a longer term paper, or it's a dissertation, or it's an article for a journal, or it's a book. No matter what it is, you have to do the same thing. You have to think about structure. And what is the structure? Well, here we go. You need to organize your argument. When I first started writing, I would write and write and write, and then I would physically cut my writing apart and put it on the floor and try to figure out what is going on with my writing. How does this stuff fit together? What is the connection between these things? If you need to do that, do that. But at some point you have to figure out, how do you organize your argument? And the only way to do that is to start examining on a meta level. Like you write, and then you step back, you go, what did I just write? What did I say? What am I trying to say? Where am I going? Who am I? And what is the nature of this writing and this exercise that I'm engaged in right now? So organize your argument. It's number one. Number two, you're going to develop a clear introduction. Introduction is so important. That whole thing about you never get a second chance to make a first impression in writing too. If the first impression is the first couple sentences on the page. If I can't even get through your first sentence without either wanting to fall asleep or just being annoyed at some dumb thing that I don't like about your first couple of sentences, then I'm going to carry those bad feelings that I have all the way through the rest of your paper. And let me tell you, you don't want your professors to read the first couple of sentences and decide you don't care what you wrote in this paper, because they don't care then about your paper. And it's really hard as a reader to manufacture feelings for something that slaps you in the face with how indifferent it is to your understanding. So you need to develop a clear introduction. The third is you've got to avoid tangents. Okay, law students, listen, I know what we teach you in the first year of law school is, your issue spotting. So you're always finding some new thing that you have to think about. Well, what about this? Well, what if this? Well, what if that? Well, what if this? Well, what if that? And you drive yourself and everyone around you crazy with the what ifs. Yeah, that's just the nature of being a lawyer. But when you write it down, you have to figure out, well, am I on a tangent or is this the main point of this paper? And you have to get rid of those tangents. You have to make every sentence count. I'll talk about that some more in a minute. And you have to edit and edit and edit and edit. If you don't edit your own paper and I am editing your paper when I'm trying to read it for substance, we're in trouble. You see how we're talking about structure right now? And if I can't get past your structure to the substance, you're not going to get a good grade in my class. You're not going to be an effective communicator, and it's going to be a struggle for you to improve. Okay, I'm going to go through these a little bit more slowly in a little bit more detail. Here we go. Let's talk about organizing your argument. I got to tell you, for our purposes in law school, you never have to stray from the structure I'm about to give you. You can follow it like a straitjacket. It will not steer you in the wrong direction. I promise. Part one is your introduction. Part two is your background and context setting. Part three is the problem that you're going to solve or the issue that you're going to analyze. Part four is the possible solution or your proposed way of analyzing an old problem in a new way. And part five is your conclusion. If you look at your paper and you have 73 parts, you have too many parts. I don't understand the structure of your paper and no one else does either. If you look at your paper and you have part one, followed by part A, followed by part sub one little I, and there's no additional sections underneath, something's wrong with the structure of your argument. Something's wrong with your organization. Almost always in law school, when you are not sure about your paper, what's going on with this paper? I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I wrote it in 24 hours. I have no idea what it's about. I'm hoping to, get through this class. Look at the structure of it. If it's more than 5 parts, reorganize it into 5 parts. Introduction, background, problem to be solved, possible solution, conclusion. If you structure your paper in these 5, I promise you it's going to be a better paper than it was when it had 15, 13, 27, or 73 sections. I just can't be more clear than that. 5 sections, that's all you need. Just do it over and over. And then someday, yeah, in the future, you'll be like, okay, this paper really has 6 sections, or this paper really does have 7. Honest, I swear, I'm sure. Then I will say, okay, did you try to get it into 5? And you say, yes, I did. I really tried to get it into 5, but honestly, look at how this all works together. This makes sense. Then I will say, okay, I accept your 7. But try writing in 5 sections rigidly. It's like it will free you to write beautifully if you don't have to worry about what's the structure of my argument because you already have it. Okay, so 5 sections, never any more and rarely any fewer. 5 sections, just try it. If it sounds too rigid, trust me, when you get rid of this and you don't have to think about it anymore, you can spend all of your creative energy on the content of what's in your paper, the substance of it, instead of the structure. Okay, developing a clear introduction. All right, you've probably heard people give you different advice about the introduction. I'm going to spend a little time on this because the introduction is the key to getting people to read and be open to the rest of your writing. That is, if you shut down with a bad introduction, if you shut down the reader who wants to know what you're saying, trust me, you also shut down every reader who doesn't want to know what you're saying. No one's going to read it. But you want to develop this clear introduction because you want to hit the reader right away. You want to engage and you want to have them saying, oh, okay, well, what else is here? I'm interested in this topic. How do you do that? Well, I think that you write the introduction first. Now, some people have already told you, no doubt, in your law school career already, write the introduction last. They'll say, write all of your arguments and organize your arguments and then write your introduction. I disagree. And here's why. I think the introduction is where you figure out what the heck your paper's about. And you don't actually know what your paper's about until you read that introduction and you say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And guess what? The introduction is really, really simple. It doesn't have a lot going on in it. It situates the reader. It tells the reader what the paper's about. And it tells the reader what the question to be answered is. And then usually I prefer it gives the reader a roadmap as to the rest of the paper. Here's how I'm going to structure this argument in this paper or this discussion in this paper. You do it first, then you have your structure, and then you follow it as you write the rest of the paper. But, here's the thing. You're going to constantly consult, rewrite, and edit the introduction as you develop the paper. The introduction for me is the part of the paper that I have usually written 50 times minimum. 50 times I've gone back and said, okay, what did I say I was going to do? Did I do that? What question did I say I was going to answer? Did I answer that question? This is the structure that I thought I had at the beginning, my 3 sections. Here's what I thought I was doing. Did I do those things? Oh, I strayed. I went somewhere else. What happened? So go rewrite the introduction as you get more sophisticated in understanding your own paper. Rewrite that introduction multiple times. And then, rewrite it, and rewrite it one more time. And then finally, you're going to write the conclusion last. Usually you run out of steam at the conclusion. You don't even know what to put in the conclusion anymore. You're exhausted. You're tired. You don't want to just fit this paper in, get it in under the deadline, and you don't care anymore. Okay, if you don't care anymore, I'm all right with that. I understand. And here's the trick for the conclusion. If you really don't care anymore, you just can't even, you wrote the word conclusion and you got nothing to say, go back to the introduction, rewrite it and put that in the conclusion. It's fine. It's going to be fine. Don't copy it. Don't copy paste, but rewrite that introduction and stick it in the conclusion and just say, this is what I did in the paper. No one's going to be too mad at you for that. The conclusion can just be a summary. So here's the thing. If you don't write a conclusion, it's like hanging up the phone without saying goodbye, or like that last Zoom second when nobody knows whether the call's really over. Somebody has to say, okay, that's it, goodbye, and then leave, or end the meeting. Somebody's got to take charge. And when you're a writer, that's you. You have to take charge. You have to develop the clear introduction. You have to lead the reader through your argument, and you have to say goodbye. And if your goodbye at the end is just, hey, remember at the beginning, I told you I was going to do A, B, and C? I did that. Aren't I awesome? Have a nice day. Goodbye. And be clear about your goodbye. Don't be wishy-washy about, like the future and blah, 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 and clouds and rainbows and unicorns. You got to say goodbye. That's why you do the conclusion last. You're done. and you hand it in. Okay, avoiding tangents. Here's the thing. It's really hard to do. This is why you have to rewrite the introduction so many times. You got to state a clear point. You can't be muddled in like a lot of words up front. If you use too many adjectives and too many blah, blah, blah at the beginning, and you don't even know what your point is, then no wonder your paper goes all over the place and goes off the rails. You don't even know what you were talking about the whole time. So you got to state a clear point. And the way to state a clear point, there is no easy way to do it. You have to rewrite it 153 times until you state it clearly. And, sometimes the way to check if you're stating a clear point is to just like turn to your neighbor and say, this is my point. And even if they're not listening, you saying it out loud shows you what you messed up in stating your clear point. It's not very clear, and you're going to clarify it, and you're going to develop it through the paper. That is, each time you go to write a new section, you look at this new paragraph, you say, okay, how does this relate to what I was just saying? And how does it relate to what I said I was going to do at the beginning? How does it relate to what I just said? How does it relate to where I started in the introduction? And keep going back and forth. Make sure that you go back to that clear point. Am I still developing that clear point? Am I off in la la land, just wandering around in a field of daisies, picking up whatever flower I find and showing it to the reader and hoping that they're interested in it? They're not. I'm here to tell you they're not. You have to keep the reader on track by stating a clear point up front and developing it throughout the paper. Okay, here's the thing that a lot of students get wrong a lot. See, I know you because I was you. It's a long time ago, admittedly. But here's the thing that happens when you're a law student. You can't discern yet. You haven't developed enough judgment between ideas to know which one matters and which one doesn't. Which one of these is going to get me, a better grade, and which one is going to annoy the reader. It's hard for you to tell. So you have to figure out how to determine whether something's relevant. So you have to keep saying this to yourself. Many ideas in the universe are important. Is this idea that I am writing right now, is it important here? Is this the right idea for the reader right now when they're reading it? And if it's not relevant, if it's interesting, but ultimately it's a tangent, it's something, like, oh, you could look over here if you're interested, reader. Lovely reader does not want to look over there. They want to know where we're going, and you have to lead them there. You have to be in charge. Okay, and then don't use the conclusion to spring big ideas on the reader. So sometimes it's interesting. I said, like, a lot of times you get to the conclusion and you're sort of tired of your paper and you don't want to write your paper anymore. You just want to finish. And that's a good instinct, because I think that means you left it all in the substance of your argument in the middle of the paper, which is where your energy belongs the most, in my view, in addition with the introduction. But sometimes students get to the end, they're like, oh, I guess I didn't really do much with this paper. Let me just talk about justice real quick at the end. No, don't do that. Stop that. Okay, don't do that. Just stick with the point that you developed up front. Develop it. And then at the end say, I developed that point and not the whole universe of points. Live with it and love it, reader, because they will if you're decisive about it. So don't spring big ideas like, things you would have done, or, things you didn't do, but gee whiz, at the end of the day, it seems like maybe it was more important than you thought. All right, we're almost through the structure. We're going to make every sentence count. Okay, here's the thing. In every law school exam, paper, blah, 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 you've got word count. Word count is precious. Word count is not to be wasted. Don't waste it. Don't waste it on extensive blah, blah, blah background, because then I'm in your background going, when are we going to get to the argument? Like, where's the point of all this? So you don't spend your precious word count on it. You have to pare that down, like write it all out. Writing is learning, but then you've got to edit until you get it down to a reasonable background. A background section is only a couple of paragraphs. It's not pages. I should not be at page 10 when I finally get to, the new idea in this paper. Especially don't spend precious word count in repetition. I have seen this so many times, I just don't even care to count. How many times a student will say something, then say it again, then say it again, then say it again in each section of the paper. And there are clues to this in your writing. You can find these clues in your own text. Look for these clues in your own writing to discover why it is that after you wrote 2,000 words, it feels like you wrote nothing. It's because you did write nothing, because you wrote the same idea 16 different times. And here are the clues that you use to help yourself to see that you already said that thing. Sometimes, listen, it's not a terrible thing that you want to repeat, okay? Sometimes we repeat because we feel really strongly about something, like, look, reader, I really want you to understand this thing. So I'm going to really tell you, and then I'm going to really tell you again. And I understand that instinct, but you've got to really have an editing eye. It's one thing to be able to just produce words and throw them all over the page. It's another to be able to edit down until the reader gets gently led from beginning through to the end to this beautiful story that you want to tell. So here's the clues. Watch out for these. Do you see this in your paper? Do you say "that is to say" a lot? Do you say "in other words"? Do you say that a lot? Because that's a clue that you're about to repeat yourself. In other words, let me tell you that again and again. And here's the worst. Oh, I hate when I see this. As explained above, and if you say, well, I need to explain it again because, like at the beginning, I was just doing like a roadmap and now I'm going to explain it. Well, if you already explained it in your roadmap was too long and your paper's not structured properly. You didn't explain it above. If you explain it above, you shouldn't be explaining it now. Edit and edit again. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. I know this is hard for you to hear, law students, but I don't care about your writing if you don't care about it. If you struggled to get something done and you threw something together, I see it and it's hard for me to read it. I have to read it whether it's a good paper or it's a bad paper. If it's a bad paper, I have to read it and tell you why it's bad. That's what grading is. That's why grading is not fun. Professors don't like grading. We don't like grading. You know that, right? Because it's not creative. It's destructive. It's like I have to tell you what's wrong with your argument or your answer. I don't like that. That doesn't make me feel happy. I feel unhappy about that. I want you all to be happy, joyful people. I don't want to be scratching all over your paper like no and repetition and cliche and all this stuff. But so this is the thing. The only way out of that trap is to edit. You have to edit. If I'm editing, we're in the wrong place. If I'm editing your paper when you hand it in for a grade, if I'm editing it for structure and I'm editing typos and I'm saying where are we? What's happening? I don't understand. Then we're in the wrong place because you got to do that. You have to do that. Now, I know you don't like to hear that, law students. You want to think of that law as like this thing that you're going to discover in the universe. It's just out there somewhere. You're going to stumble across it. And all of a sudden, here's the law. You're going to show the law and people will say, you know the law. Good, kind person, smart, professional. No, you have to explain it. You have to communicate it in writing and verbally, as I'm doing now. And some of you are going to be more effective at one than the other, but all of you are going to have to write in some way. And if you do not care about your writing, why should the reader care? Let me tell you, they don't. They don't care, and they get hostile to you if you don't care and you show them you don't care with bad writing. Readers are very impatient people. You should know because you're a reader too, and you read a lot of things that you don't like to read, like, long-winded cases. And you think, why don't they just tell me blah, blah, blah. That's how we feel when we read your work too. Okay, little visual test for you. How many typos are in my one sentence here? That's off. That's 2. And there's only 1 P and acceptable. Of course, I exaggerate in this little demo, but man, if you don't take out that extra "the," if you don't switch to the correct spelling of, there, or there, if you don't notice the squiggly underline and do something about it, I'm going to be annoyed. I'm grading you. I see the squiggly line. Why don't you see the squiggly line? Because you didn't read your own paper before you gave it to me. And now you threw that garbage at me and you expect me to figure out what this paper is about. Forget it. I hate it. I hate it already. If I see 2 or 3 typos in a paper, I cannot give you better than a B. I can't do it. Sorry. You do not get better than a B in my class. I don't care how much substance you have. If you can't bother to edit your papers, read and fix your mistakes, they're mistakes. And I'm going to tell you why. You cannot excel if the person reading your work sees the mistakes that you made. You cannot make them trust you. I don't trust you. If I can't trust you with a small underlined squiggly line in your writing, how can I trust you with a $50 million deal? Why would I ever trust you with that? If I can't trust you to figure out which to use in context, how can I trust what you're going to put in my disclosure statement? I'm going to be scared of you. You are dangerous to me as an associate, as a junior person, as a clerk. You're dangerous because you don't take enough care of your work. And if you don't take care of your work, then I'm going to have to do it. And I don't have time for that. So you have to edit. That's your job. If you don't like to edit, if you don't like to reread what you wrote, this is not the field for you. You should not be in law if you don't love to read stuff and read it again and edit it. That's the job, working with words. That's why none of us are in math school. None of us are in economics right now. Well, some of you might be in economics, but it's in law, you're working with words. So you got to get the words right. Spend time to find and delete phrases in your writing, in your editing. Do this. Look for weak words. Look for passive words. Look for repetitive words. Look for lawyerly sounding words like the dreaded said document. Ugh. If I read that one more time, honestly, I don't know what said document is, but it's annoying. It's very lawyerly sounding. If you love the sound of said, fine, okay. But, make sure it's correct. And then just blah words. Just look through your writing. Oh, blah, it's blah. If it's blah, get it out. If you think it's blah, if you can't even read your own writing because you're so sick of reading and so boring, guess how I feel? I feel bored too and annoyed because I have to read all of them in a very short amount of time, right? So why would you be happy with boring blah work? You shouldn't be. Don't be satisfied with that. All right, we are finished with structure. Let me tell you, if you can get the structure right, you're almost home. The structure is what guides you through the substance. So let's talk about substance. You have to substantiate everything and you must represent others' claims accurately. Students, this is law school. Law is about substantiation. You must substantiate everything you say. The sky is blue? Really? Who says? You must represent others' claims accurately. So-and-so said blah, blah, blah. Really? Are you sure that's what they said? Are you paraphrasing? Are you simplifying? Are you engaging in hyperbole? Because then I'm going to attack that. And you should attack each other for doing that. That's why law students are annoying, right? We are an annoying bunch because we're looking around and saying, well, are you sure? Well, what about, right? That's your job. That's the job. Attention to detail is in this space. Okay. What is law's methodology? Like when people say methodology or legal method, that can mean a lot of things. Well, what is it? Well, I'm here to tell you, I know what it is. This is what it is. It is to make persuasive claims with appropriate support using accepted forms of evidence. Now, if you don't like that, if you think, oh, it must be something else, I'm entertaining your suggestions. I'm open to hear your suggestions. But I am here to tell you, law is just words and people who use violence to make people conform to them. So that's pretty powerful to say that words have to hold this whole structure up and that we're going to use violence to protect them. So that means the words better be right. They better be the right words, which means we're engaged in persuasion all the time. And you can hear me attempting desperately to persuade you to care about the way you write, about the way you craft, about the way you exercise your professional skills in writing, right? So law's methodology is making persuasive claims with appropriate support using accepted forms of evidence. Now go back and look at the last paper you wrote. Go back and look at the last paper you wrote. Did you do that? My guess is you probably didn't. You thought, oh no, law is something scientific in nature that I just go find and I present it. No, It's persuasive claims. You're going to make persuasive claim after persuasive claim, and you have to build all the support around those claims as you go. All right. Do not cite secondary sources as support for claims made about primary sources. Okay, first year law students, you know what a primary source is, right? Let's hope that the answer is yes. So if I say the Tax Act, the Income Tax Act, you will know that's a primary source because that's the law that legislators made over there in the parliament. And you know that laws that people write down and put into big fancy code books are primary sources. And you know that when someone comes along and says, you know what it says in section 2, I'm going to explain it to you. Section 2 of the act says blah, blah, blah. That's a secondary source. They're telling you something about the primary source. Now, if you go write a paper and you say the law says blah, 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 and then you cite the person who told you about the law instead of the law itself, you blew it. You totally blew it. Go back and do it again because you did not do it right. You must cite primary sources when primary sources are the thing you're citing. It seems so circular and tautological, and yet students get this wrong way more often than they should. Cite primary sources. If your professor stood in class and said blah, 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 and you wrote down blah, 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 and then you footnoted and you wrote, lecture, blah, blah, wrong. Where did the professor get that information? From some primary source? Go find it. That's the one you're supposed to be citing. Is it a case? Is it an act? Go find it. That's the one you cite. Cite that. If somebody says, I think this about that idea in the law, or I'm telling you my interpretation is this, and in your paper, you're talking about someone's interpretation that you find persuasive, then that's when you cite the secondary source. When you're using somebody else's interpretation and you're pointing to the interpretation, not the law itself. Do not make naked empirical claims. This is a hard one for law students. We like to tell you things about the universe and then, just assume you know the sky is blue. Don't tell me the sky is blue. I don't want to hear the sky is blue without a citation until you've been doing this for 20 years. In 20 years, you can come back and say, hey, I wrote in a paper that the sky is blue. I'll be like, okay, fine. But as a law student, no, it's not. No, it's not, unless somebody said it was. And you can show me that person that told you and where that information comes from. Did everybody think something? No, they don't. No, they don't, unless you show me that they do. Is this true about the universe? No, it isn't, unless you show me in a footnote that it is. Most people think, kill it. Just kill it. You don't know what most people think. You don't even know what you think half the time. So you definitely don't know what most people think. Many scholars say, then you better have a footnote with at least 3. 1 is not many. 1 is 1. 2 is a couple. 3 is many. It's really not many. It's a few, but I'll allow it. Do not say many scholars say, and then just leave it without a footnote. It's naked. Put some clothes on that. And then in most cases, you don't even know one case. Forget about most cases. Just get that stuff out of your writing. Just don't write that stuff because you're making naked claims that aren't supported. And you need to be careful of that as a lawyer because it's not persuasive. I'm going to start to mistrust your judgment and I'm going to start to doubt your analysis and I'm going to start to find cracks in the armor of this beautifully constructed paper that you wrote. And I'm going to say, I don't think that you know what you're talking about anymore because you're just throwing naked claims all over the place. All right. Here's the next one. Represent others' claims accurately. This means that when you say someone said something, you need to read it carefully and restate their arguments even more carefully. And here's the reason why, because you are prone, as I am, as we all are, to the straw man fallacy. The straw man fallacy is misrepresenting someone else's argument in order to make it easier to attack. We are notorious for doing this. So-and-so said blah, blah, blah. And they're so wrong and so dumb. What an idiot. What a moron. Oh yeah, that's easy to say as long as you misrepresent their argument. I'm here to tell you, most scholars who write papers with a lot of footnotes and get published in things do not just throw around. I mean, some are bad, okay? I'm not saying they're all fabulous, but they don't just throw around information willy-nilly. They usually have constructed something of an argument, and your job is to figure out what that argument is and not make it into a straw man that's easy to knock down, but to deal with the argument that is. That's why in your writing, it's very dangerous for you to say that a scholar, a professor, so-and-so is wrong. Really, I would recommend against it. Don't say people are wrong. Instead, look at the argument you are taking issue with and say, this argument is not convincing because, remember that methodology? It's about persuasion. Point out what's not persuasive and show why it's not persuasive. That's an effective critique. It's not an effective critique to say something is wrong, because there's a really good chance you're wrong and you don't want to be wrong about stuff like that. And what if the professor is like friends with the professor you are writing this to? Oh, that would be awkward. Don't do that. That's terrible and dangerous. But just in general, in the habit of your lives, don't go around shoving fingers in people's faces and saying you're wrong. It's not that helpful. It's not that useful. And it's also not persuasive, because it's not a very rich argument. You can build the argument and show me that they're wrong. Don't tell me they're wrong. Show me they're wrong. Why are they wrong? Because this argument that they've made is not persuasive. And why not? Because you found some gap in the analysis. Okay, that was substance. There's just those two. I mean, you can get there. You can get there. All right, style. I've got 3 for style: clarity of expression, modes of expression, and appearance. Okay, like, listen, I know we're in law school and I just told you it's all about words, but I think you can probably tell from my presentation that I also love the style of things. Things need to look right. They need to feel like they're in the moment. They're about the thing that they're about. You need to feel like this paper is well put together. So style actually matters, and I'm going to just focus on a couple of these. Okay. Do you find yourself saying any of these things? It is evident that. It goes without saying that. It is clear that. It's apparent that. Oh, if you put all of these in one paper, I'm going to die, honestly. It's important to note that. I love this one. I can't even say it. It makes me so angry. I would be remiss if I did not mention this is one of my favorites. This is actually pulled from a student paper. Oh man. You do have to love how it does go on. While opinions differ on the matter, at least one school of thought has it that, yeah, this is all blah, 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 blah. If you put this in your paper, I will underline it. I will put parentheticals around it. I'll say, if it's clear, then why do you have to say it's clear? If it's apparent, why are you saying it's apparent? Why would you, if you would be remiss if you didn't mention, just mention it. Why are you telling me all of this? You know what we call this? We call this throat clearing. It's like you have to talk before you can talk. It's like that person that puts up their hand and says, look, what I'm saying isn't really all that important, or this is not a very good argument, but, just cut all that, just get rid of all, it's blah, 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 get rid of it. You don't need it, and it muddles your discussion. For clarity of expression, just cut it off. If the sentence makes sense without it, then you don't need all that blah, blah, blah. Okay, what about cliches? Do you tell people to avoid like the plague? I'm not even sure we can even say that anymore, because people don't seem to really want to avoid the plague in some sense. But do people put the cart before the proverbial horse in your world? Do you talk about tails that wag dogs? Do you talk about calm before the storm? Do you talk about even playing field, burning questions? Do you talk about being caught in the crossfire, fanning flames, cleaning slates, or a far cry from things? Please, do you tell me that there's icing on the cake, or that something fits the bill? Do you say that something boils down to? Do you even know what you're saying when you say these things? They have been said so many times. They've been used in so many contexts. Do you even know what putting a cart before a horse means? Okay, here's what I'm just saying. No, stop, take it out. If you put a cliche in, if you use metaphor, listen, we use metaphor every day to explain things. Metaphor is not the enemy, but cliched metaphor is the enemy. It's meaningless. Get it out. delete it. Just do something else. Please, I beg you, have someone who has read thousands of student papers. If one more student paper tells me about things boiling down to, I can't anymore. You've got to stop. They're not persuasive. They're not persuasive. They're cliched metaphors. And cliched metaphors are just filler. It's just blah, blah, blah. I want to add one note to that. Cliched metaphors also can, not in the ones I've given, I don't think, but in some cases can mask some underlying assumptions, which can be extremely harmful in terms of perpetuating cultural stereotypes. So you want to be super careful whenever you use metaphor. Learn to recognize your metaphors and learn to understand the assumptions that underlie them. And in writing, it's hard. I know how hard it is. You talk about building bridges. You talk about paths and journeys. We all do it. We have to do it. We have to use metaphor to make our words come to life. I just used a metaphor there. And we use them in speaking all the time. I've used 100 metaphors, if not 1,000, since I started talking, almost an hour ago. So metaphors are part of storytelling, and we are doing storytelling in law. Persuasive speech is trying to get people to understand something that's complicated. Trust me, I know we have to use metaphor, but you got to stop using these cliches because they don't mean anything and they're not persuasive. And they might actually skewer your argument. In a lot of cases, students use them because they don't really know what they're talking about. Okay, finally, does it beg the question? No, it doesn't. Don't use this. You don't know how to use it. If you know how to use it, still don't use it. It's annoying. Don't use it. Nothing begs the question. Nothing. It doesn't. That's all I can say. All right. We're getting there. I know. If you think this is exciting, you should see me in class. I'd have to sit down to Zoom to you. Can you imagine what it's like to be in class with me all day? Just jumping up and down and getting excited about modes of expression. Okay, what can we learn from a rhetorical question? Please just tell me. Stop asking rhetorical questions in your writing. Don't ask rhetorical questions. Just don't. Again, with a lot of experience and a lot of thought, and you've written 100 books, fine, use rhetorical questions. You're writing a textbook, use a rhetorical question. I have them in my own text. Don't use rhetorical questions in your writing because you're using them as a crutch to avoid answering them or examining the assumptions that underlying them. You're using that as a crutch. I see you doing it. I notice it and it annoys me. Stop doing that. Don't do that. No more rhetorical questions in student writing. Okay, we're almost there. We're almost through this first part of really basic rules. And that's appearance. Okay, really simple. Just make it nice. Just make it nice. Is this so hard? Is this so hard for you to look at your paper and say, do I have 43 fonts? Am I using Courier, for God's sake? Am I, what is this, Calibri? Microsoft Word has absolutely makes me crazy that they decided Calibri was the basic default font. And that if you set something as a title, it was going to be blue and like 43 point. Just Times New Roman. It's very simple. I will tell you that on my YouTube, I have that excerpt from a show that I won't mention right now because, copyright and all that stuff. And he talks about Times New Roman and using Times New Roman in your papers. You can go see it. But, don't use like funny, crazy fonts like what I used in my PowerPoint here. Don't use that in a paper. You can use that in a PowerPoint. It's interesting to look at. It's like my little notebook theme. It's nice, right? It looks nice, right? Like, come on, it's nice. Did I make it nice? I did make it nice. Did it take me a lot of time? Yes. And so you need to make it nice, and that's going to take you some time. Sorry, I know you hate that bad news. Okay, that's it for really basic rules for good writing. Any questions? No? Then I'm going to give you a dozen words to exercise from your professional writing right now. Okay, here they come. Are you ready? I don't want you to use these words anymore. They are word litter. Again, I'm going to break this rule and you are going to break this rule, but I want you to do it thoughtfully. If you're going to use these words, I want you to know that I hate these words And I want you to hear my voice in your head saying, ah, no, stop. Okay. Very. It's very important. It's very big. It's very large. It's very, very, very. No, it's not very. Really, it's really good. It's really big. It's really important. Actually, no. Surely, no. So it's so good. It's so big. It's so important. It's so significant. It's so overdone. Clearly, if it's clearly, are you sure? Clearly. Oh, so overused. Quite. It's quite important. It's quite significant. Quite is a useless and worthless word. Never use it. I hate it. Pretty. It's pretty good. Oh, no pretty in legal writing. No pretty. None. Ever. Don't use it. Just never. In fact, okay, in fact and indeed kind of go together. In fact and indeed are kind of like, you need them sometimes. So I'm not going to be, too mean about in fact or indeed. In fact or indeed are those words that sometimes you just can't escape. You have to have them. You need them as a signal, but don't put pretty in there ever. I'm telling you. Of course, you know that. No, I don't, of course, know that. Just tell me. Don't tell me, of course. Don't be so full of yourself talking about, of course. It sounds like you think you know everything. Of course, this or that or the other. You don't know everything, and neither do I. I'm the reader. I'm trying to learn from you. Don't of course me. That's annoying. It's very dismissive. That said, on the other hand, at the end of the day, and then obviously, it's not obvious. I'm telling you, obviously is like a cursed word. Don't use it. Pretty and obviously together should just go away and never come back to our writing. Please, I'm begging you. Okay, that's my dozen words to excise from your professional writing right now. And now I'm going to take 2 questions. In terms of the conclusion. So if somebody told you, said, what I like in the conclusion is for you to like end the conclusion with a big surprise of like where we might go next, then yeah, do that in that class, but never do it again. I hate that idea. But like, as I told you, these are my rules. This is not everybody's rules. This is like my, idiosyncratic way of seeing the world. It's not everybody's idiosyncratic way of seeing the world. So I think with writing, for me, I want like a clear beginning, middle, and end. And so I don't want anything brand new in the end. I'm not interested in that. But if you say to me, okay, I'm just going to end like, on some high note at the end, like my last sentence is going to be like, and the future of humanity is at stake or something like, okay, fine, whatever. I'm not too bothered by it. Okay. So what I said at the beginning is if you're not sure what to put in the conclusion, then you go back to your introduction and rewrite it and put that in the conclusion. Say, so in this paper, I was going to do this. I was going to explain blah, and I explained blah. I showed you blah, blah, and blah, and that is why my explanation of blah is good. And, that's, for me, that's like it's just a fine way to, end the discussion. You know what I mean? Just like remind them where you were going and that you got there. Why do I hate it so much? Why do I hate them so much? Why am I harshing on your favored terms of phrase?
They're not my favorite. They're not my favorite. But...
yeah. Okay. So again, it's a matter of style, and this is my style. So my style is, can you take the actually or the in fact off? And is the contradiction that you are making or the clarification you are making still clear? So if it's not clear, if you say, if you make claim, person X says blah, and then you really want to say, but actually, or in fact, or indeed, like indeed is usually to say, yes, I agree with them. And in fact, you're going to contradict them, right? And actually you're going to contradict them normally. So if you do that, so just write it in there, like do your normal writing. And then later when you go back and you say, okay, I'm going to edit now. And Christian's yelled at me for an hour about Not saying actually, and definitely not saying pretty. You don't say pretty, do you? Here's what I would say about your actually, or your in fact, or, so when you write them and you go back and read your paper, just go count how many times did you say actually. If it's once, then I'm probably not going to be too upset with you. If you say actually once, and in fact once, and indeed once, and however, and on the other hand, and in contrast, and you see what I'm saying? Question like volume. So if you just do it once, use it sparingly, and it is signaling to the reader a contradiction that you need, then I'm not gonna say you have to get rid of it, but I want you to think carefully about it. A lot of times you can get rid of it with careful editing. If you can't, and you just can't get rid of it, then I'm not gonna be too upset, but I'm gonna be upset if I see this 6 or 7 times in a paper of 1,800 words. Signaling is necessary, but you don't need to do it with these little word litter words. That's my view of it. You like my presentation? Or do you like the video presentation that shows a PowerPoint beside me? Or which part of that are you asking about?
Both.
Okay, so I'm using OBS, which is open broadcasting software, to show you different images. Like, for example, now I'm just me. And originally we were looking at this standby. So OBS lets me just switch between views without having to screen share. So look into it. If you're going to do any kind of online presentation, especially in Zoom allows you to share your screen, but then they make your face little, and I don't like how that feels like I'm distanced from you and you're all looking at a static picture when, like, I just feel like it's not that inspiring. And then the PowerPoint I made with my daughter's math book. So that's her graph paper. I just took a picture of it and put that in the background. And then you can see, like, I put some little drawings. You saw the little drawings. Some of those I drew and some I found from some online thing. And then I just, this is a drawing. I use Adobe Illustrator for most of that. This, however, is just standard PowerPoint. You can draw a box around something, pick outline, pick the width of your outline as at least a couple of points, and then switch to, I think it's called draw a curve, make your line a curve. So it's just a thing that PowerPoint has added. They've added bells and whistles. So happy to do, maybe I should do a advanced PowerPoint and Adobe Illustrator drawing exercise to show you how to do these things. But thank you for the question. I'm happy to share that anytime. Yes. So we asked you to do this impossibly stupid thing as law students, right? Hey, like, add to the field, in this little term paper you're going to write in this course you're taking, like, survey the field and then add something new. Like, not possible. I'm sorry that it takes law professors years to say anything relevant or new. Sorry, that's a harsh burn on my colleagues, but, like, it takes us a long time to figure out what the field is, and then like even longer, some of us, to say anything that is original. So, this is a problem. Okay, I'm going to tell you what I think, and you can test it by asking your other law professors. I think that every claim you make should have one cite. Okay, there might be 100 sites that say the same thing, but at least one cite, and not more than 2 for like sky is blue type claims. And if you get into the habit of citing primary sources, if you force yourself into that, you will find it you're going to make your life a lot easier just by not having to cite 54 scholars who said basically different iterations of the same thing, along with a lot of other stuff that you don't care about. So if you can get to a primary source, like get thee to a primary source as fast as possible when you have to say something, because it will be the easiest way to only have one cite. And then if you're saying something that is definitely like, okay, you think this, like this is now you speaking and you're telling me as a reader, I'm going to read your thoughts on somebody's analysis. I think I'm going to know that, because the way that you're going to write that is you're going to have set up claim and then support for the claim and support for the claim. And then you're going to say something like, however, or this is not persuasive because, or this would have been a stronger argument if, and then those signaling words are going to help me know that this is you speaking now. And so there's some judgment call in this, and you won't learn it in your first year, and you probably won't learn it in your second year either. You'll get there eventually to this place. Now, how many of you have read a law review article where the first page is entirely footnotes? I wrote those articles. I have done it. We have all done it. Every junior scholar out there, because what you're doing is showing that you did your homework. So the tendency to oversight is natural and good. I do not want to suppress that. I would rather see 100 sites than 0 sites. But I'm not going to read all 100 sites as your professor. I'm going to read your paper, and I'm going to see you said the sky is blue, and I'm going to look for the footnote. Did you put no footnote? You said the sky is blue. Who do you think you are? You don't get to say the sky is blue. You have to tell me somebody, preferably, in a position of authority, said that the sky is blue. Because I'm not going to be able to independently verify it. So I need somebody to trust. You see how we built this whole edifice on authority. Authority being a thing that we put on people, and we say, oh, that's an important person. So when they say something, like when the court says something, when the Supreme Court says X, then X is, right? And so this is like law and society or legal realism, right? In a nutshell, it comes out in your writing, where I'm telling you to cite something persuasive. And what I'm telling you is go find somebody in a big red robe with a furry Santa collar. If they said it, then you can just, cite them. And if they didn't say it, then you got to find somebody reputable that did say it. I'm going to look for that footnote. And even if you just have one, if you say the sky is blue and you have you have footnote and it has one source, I'm satisfied for these purposes. But if you are making a controversial argument about something, and there's multiple views on it, and you're going to say, well, scholars disagree on this, then you need 2, right? You need one on each side. So the short answer, there's no short answer. The short answer is you can't figure this out until you do it kind of over and over. So you're just going to have to keep muddling through, err on the side of providing a site. Something, at least one. I think most of the time when you're in law school and you're writing a paper, you are writing against something that already exists. You're either telling me about something that I don't know, which is expository and fine. It's just like you're just telling me something, in which case you don't have any ideas, or you're telling me about something that you disagree with, or that you want me to understand something about, in which case you are opposed to the status quo, right? Like that's what it is. I mean, it's not aggressive. It doesn't have to be aggressive or like a fight. It's just, there's something out there and you're telling me something different about it, in which case you're opposing the received wisdom, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank
So
you.
if you set that up, if you say like, this is the sky is blue, and I'm going to tell you that, at the right angle, at the right time, standing on the right street in Montreal, it's not blue at all, it's golden. Oh, okay, fine. You're right. It's not blue. It's not always blue. In this case, it's golden. I now agree with you. You've convinced me. You see what I mean?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So in my really basic rules for good writing, which you should have a link to, did they give you a link to that? So in that, you're going to see that I cite a couple of books. I think Strunk and White is probably in there. On Writing Well is probably in there. And then there's a site to a little thing by Art McAvoy called McAvoy's Heuristic. I don't know if he ever published it, but I can tell you that that's what led me to being a good writer. Art McAvoy did in that piece. So he explains how to do it step by step, from a 1 paragraph to a dissertation in detail. And so you see my idiosyncratic flattening of those lessons I learned from Art McAvoy. So it's linked in there and it's online. And that's the one I would recommend. If you love writing and you want to do more writing, and you want to be an effective legal writer, first of all, I get chills when I hear that. So thank you for being that person that wants to be a good writer. I know there's many on this call, on the Zoom, that want to be effective communicators. blessed because the world needs us, right? We need more good writing. Let's do good writing. Let's get our viewpoints out there. And Art McAvoy's heuristic is a really good place to get from like a real methodology, which you probably learn in undergrad, to legal methodology, which is like a whole strange beast. Such a good question. Thank you so much for this question. Okay, c'est très, très dur. Okay, I find it very hard to read French papers with a critical eye because the construction of language in French is very passive. And I'm an active girl. Like, I'm like, make the person do things. Don't have things happen, which happened. And then have me going, what happened there? And the French language just forces me into this much more reflective mode. And I struggle with it. So let me tell you, I taught for the first time in French last fall. It was interesting. It was exciting. It was amazing, actually. I had so much fun. Getting better in French is really hard. Here's my offer to you. Let us do that together. You go find some things that people tell you that that guide French writing, good writing in French, good legal writing in French. And you send them to me and I will read them, and then I will be more reflective and we will learn that together. That's my offer. You're free to reject the offer or, pick it up 5 years from now or whenever. I'm not on a huge deadline for that, but I would be interested in that very same question and don't have the answer to it. One is short. It's a paragraph to me, 2 paragraphs max. Like one is so short. It's like, set the context and tell me, the reader, what the heck we're doing here. Where are we here? Where are we going? And give me a roadmap, like a roadmap, like in part 2, I'm going to do this. In part 3, I'm going to do that. So one is short. It's so short. And if you can, like, I violate this in practice, but the goal is for one to be short, to the point, punchy, just hit me with it. And then 2 is like fully edited. So you did a lot of work into, like, you went and found a bunch of stuff and you read a bunch of stuff and you're going to walk me through it. But in the edit, you're going to really bring that down to just the stuff I need to know so that when we get to part 3, I'm going to be up to speed, if you will. I just used a cliched metaphor because we're talking and I didn't write it. I would never write that, but I would say it, right? So I want to be up to speed. Like, as the reader, I'm like, okay, what are we talking about? Where are you going to go? Because I want the roadmap, because I'm going to reference it. I'm going to go back to it. When I get lost in the paper, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Like, what's going on? And then I'm going to see in part 1, you said that in part 2, you were going to do this thing. And now I'm in part 2 and you're not doing this thing. What happened? Right. And I'm going to start like making, snarky comments on your paper, like, what happened and where are we and how did we get here? So for me, parts 1 and 2 is situation and get me up to speed with where you are. But part 3 is where you are. That's where you were trying to take me, right? So I want more in part 3 and part 4. Yeah. I mean, work it out as you go, right? Like, have an eye to it. Like, just think about it. Does this belong in 4 or 3? Which one is this? Right? But if you say, like, there is a problem, I'm going to tell you in part 3 what the problem is. I'm going to walk you through some of the big ideas of this problem and why it's a problem. And then I'm going to tell you that I'm going to really convince you, I'm going to persuade you that this is a problem. And then part 4 is going to say, look, I have 3 solutions I'm going to tell you about, but each one of them opens up a different problem area. And I'm going to tell you what those problems are. Then as the reader, I'm like, okay, I get it. I see what you're saying. You got a problem here. You want to solve it, but problems are complicated in law. All problems are complicated and they're multifaceted. They have lots of difficult paths you have to go down to solve them. You can't handle them all. So you go to 4. You say, I'm going to look, the problem is X and I'm going to solve it. But when I solve it, then it's going to open up problems Y and Z. That's, I think, an acceptable structure, just as long as you're thoughtful about it. Be thoughtful about it.
Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, you can have an original thought as a student. Students have original thoughts all the time. Often you get you're much more creative than those of us who've been doing it for a long time, because we get blinders on. We only can see what we see, and we can't see from your perspective. So it's totally possible for you to have an original idea. I think I will know that in the way you construct your argument. So if you have to build up, right? So going back to this structure, you're going to introduce your idea in the introduction. You're going to say, I'm going to argue. This paper will argue X, and that's your idea that it's going to argue. And you're going to organize this whole paper. Don't slip your idea in part 4, page 73. Don't slip it in there. No, if you have the idea, it goes up front in the introduction, and you build everything around it. So you start the introduction, you say, this is what this paper is going to argue. I'm going to argue that. And you make the point, I'm not going to argue that, authors X and Y and Z are all wrong. I'm going to argue this point. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do that. In part 2, I'm going to tell you that there's this problem that my idea solves, or that my idea shows something about. In part 3, I'm going to explore that problem in detail. And in part 4, I'm going to go through my perspective and analyze it and show you what it would or wouldn't solve. Then that's your idea. Then the paper's about your idea. The mistake that students will make is they will come up with the idea when they've already written 30 pages and then just try to shove it in somewhere. But, you can't do that, because, if you have an original idea, then you have to develop all the argument around it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little trick about academic writing. Every single one of us who's ever written a journal article has read something where the author cites someone else. And we haven't read the other thing that author cites, but that's the primary source. So every one of us, in a moment of haste or desperation to meet a deadline, has cited the underlying author instead of the one we read. This is wrong. We should not be doing this, but we do it because I read author X. Author X is talking about what author Y said. My job is to go read what author Y said and check. But you know what happens, right? You go to author Y and they're citing author W. And then author W is citing author S from 1902. And author S is citing author whatever. And pretty soon you can't figure out who the original idea came from. And I'm going to tell you something. A lot of academic writing does this. And this is actually bad. A lot of academic writing just goes to whoever the most popular person is that said the thing. And I'm here to tell you that almost always the most popular person that said the thing fits a very specific demographic and gets credit for ideas which are not their own over and over and over. So if you cannot find the original source where people say this, and everybody cites somebody else who said it, and all these sites seem to swirl around a little group, usually a very specific demographic group of people who cite each other, then I give you permission to not cite any of them. I hereby give you permission to not cite anyone for the concept that the sky is blue, because you don't know who said it first. You don't know. And if you cite, you are giving power to that demographic once again. The awesome power of effective visuals in professional writing. So I just want to do this part because it's important to me to add this and get this in the universe. And this is the first time I will put this on a PowerPoint. So I thought it might be fun just to get through this once. And then the next time I do it, it will be even more powerful. All right, so here's my idea. Don't be afraid to use charts to pull together a complex mess of information. You always have this in law where you're trying to deal with a bunch of different ideas and you have to pull them together. And I think students think, well, we're in words, so we have to stay in words. And me personally, I think, yes, you have to do it in words, but it also really helps to add a visual. But here's the thing I've found over the years, even an ugly chart can be useful. Like, it actually can help me as a reader, even an ugly chart. So I give you, for example, an ugly chart. Here's an ugly chart. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. It's the consolidated statement of revenues, Canada's budget. There you have the different kinds of taxes in the first column, the same in French in the second. Then you have the dollars in thousands of dollars. And then you have the percentage of the total federal budget. So this is useful. Let's say I want to teach you about the different kinds of taxes that we have in Canada. Even this ugly chart is better than 3 pages of text on each of these things, or just a list in the text. This is better because I can see, oh, look at that. Half of our income comes from, like, I can see it immediately in the table that there's like one big chunk, oh, personal taxes. And then there's like a bunch of other stuff and they sort of don't look all that important. Maybe corporate-ish is a little bit sort of. But then consider even a standard pie chart, which, is sort of a disfavored these days, but consider a standard pie chart with the same information. What does that look like? Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, that's better, right? And I can do something like this. I can overlay, a transparency on top to show, oh, that's the income tax and that's all the other kinds of taxes. Okay, now I'm really seeing something. Oh, like, look how important the income tax is. Now, even though I was talking about it in the paper, this visual kind of shows me something different about the same information. But like, what about this? So this is one of those distribution charts. Yeah, you can use, I think Google can actually do this. I use Tableau for this. So this just shows me a different way to kind of say, oh, the big taxes in Canada are personal and corporate. Oh, and then goods and services popped out of the chart. You see what I mean? Like, you didn't quite see it before, but now we started to say, oh, okay, wow, that's interesting. What? Employment insurance premiums, is that even a tax? That's interesting. Starts to like bring some different information out of the data. And then finally, you can really mess with people though, right? You guys know this. You can mess with data until it tells a different story. Well, what about this story? Now, which one's important? This looks a little bit different. So, again, using Tableau to make bubbles and different colors and, who knows what it's telling. So, the idea of this is just don't be afraid of experimenting. Some things can be done with Google. A lot can be done with Tableau if you know Tableau. And so I thought it might be useful just to, let's just take a look at different kinds of things that people can use to make different kinds of visuals that might be useful in your writing. So some of these you might be aware of, like Wordle, which the original Wordle is gone, but wordclouds.com and Ed Wordle can do word clouds, and PictoChart to do infographics, Lucidchart to do mind maps, Foam Tree to do these cool, I can't remember what they're called. They have this special name of how they do it. Anyway, Tableau there on the right, it's actually not free, but I think McGill students can get a 1-year subscription just by signing up with your McGill email. So it's worth, taking a look. And then, you have Rawgrash, Zing chart, of course, R, which is free, but impossible. You have to be a programmer. I can't use R, but there's Adobe Illustrator as well. And so like, there's all these sources that you can use. Some are really easy, but they only do one thing, like Wordle. And some are really complicated, but they do everything, like R, and some are somewhere in between. Like Tableau is pretty easy to use and actually pretty powerful, but like I didn't even have it on here, but Google can also do a lot of this stuff. Like you can do more with Google Sheets than you can with Excel sometimes. Like Google was the first to do the geo mapping where you can draw a map with different colors. Well before, I don't even know if you can do that in Excel, but you can definitely do it in Google. So just as an example, like here's a word cloud. Now here's an interesting thing that you can do with word cloud, even if you don't use it in your document. Are you unsure what your paper is about? Feed your paper into Wordle at wordle.net and see what your paper's about right away. You're going to see right away. You're going to know, look at it's about taxation, authority, and questions, and the state and government and law, right? So Wordle is an interesting word analysis because it's using an algorithm to push out the words you use the most. So if you are one of these people that loves to use a lot of filler words, they'll show up here. You'll be like, oh, how come these are all adjectives, like actually really pretty good. So for, certainly, obviously, how come that's all my words? I don't have any of those words here. So I did okay in this paper. So you might want to use that in a paper, but you can also just use it to analyze your own writing. This is a nice tool. I mean, why not? It's easy. And then Lucidchart, a little harder, is like a little bit of work. Lucidchart has you can get a free version with McGill, but it's limited. It's sort of okay. I go back and forth, but I like to be able to make boxes and, step through the thing. I would never do this instead of a paper. This would be, you have to have the paper beside it. They see those numbers. I don't know, maybe too small, but like there's these little numbers on each box. For me, when you do a structure chart like this, or like a chart of like where to go, you should add those numbers. And then in your text, you put the numbers as you go. You say like in box 4, we ask, is there discrimination? What this means is blah, 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 blah. Right. So this is just an interesting, way to do it. Some people use mind mapping. I don't know if I didn't have mind map on my chart. I haven't used them in a while, but same idea. Just visually structuring your words. Sometimes you might add this chart in your document. Sometimes you're going to use this document to figure out what the state of the law is for yourself. You're just trying to work it out. It's complicated. There's a lot of steps. What the heck is all this stuff? You might use Lucidchart to kind of organize your own information, which helps you think through a problem. And the free version is more or less acceptable. It's maybe not great. Okay, what's here? I don't remember. Let's see. Here we go. This was my ending. Here's the single best piece of advice I can give you about writing. Maybe you could guess. If I had a chat window, I would let you guess. You would guess. What's the single best piece of advice I can give you about writing? Let's see if you guessed it. It is just write more. That's all you can do. You just have to write. You got to write. You got to write all the time. You got to write every day. You got to write something. You already do. Like you write on Twitter, and like you write your posts on Facebook, whatever. You write emails. You're writing all day, every day. Just, write some more. Just write some more and do it intentionally, do it thoughtfully. This has been Academic Writing with me, your friendly tax prof, Allison Christians. I really do hope to see many of you in class, in the world. I will not know any of you, obviously. So if you passed me in the hall and you were sitting in this class and you liked it, wave at me, say hi. I'll be like, who are you? And maybe our paths will cross again. That's it. This is really over this time. Goodbye and have a great end of your first year. Take care, everybody.